This is Hannibal with the AmCon Kentucky Medical Team. Today I want to make a video discussing pressure dressings. Nowadays, I know they've got this nationwide Stop the Bleed campaign, which I think is fantastic, and I don't have any faults with it whatsoever. I think it's great with our modern society with mass shootings and just increased level of violence overall, and maybe more to come. Then I think it's wonderful to teach people how to deal with bleeding so that they don't panic. I've mentioned this before in one of my videos, but one show that I've watched a lot with, sorry I'm putting some of my stuff back together, I just made another video and I'm trying to get a few of these done in a hurry, but I watch this show First 48 a lot, which deals with murders and the investigations and stuff. And they go on these crime scenes, and I see a lot of cases where people die from injuries that I feel they probably could have survived if they had just some rudimentary first aid applied. But a lot of times people just freak out and they don't know what to do. And you can hear it on these 911 calls. They'll just be screaming, carrying on. Nobody is doing anything to stop the bleeding. So I think the Stop the Bleed campaign is great, but they rely very heavily on tourniquets. Pretty much just put a tourniquet on anything. And that's fine. I don't fault that, but the way I was trained is the tourniquet was sort of the last resort. When you came across somebody and they were wounded, specifically, let's say a gunshot, if it was obvious that they had arterial bleeding, then yes, apply a tourniquet. But if not, then apply direct pressure. And even Stop the Bleed classes, they teach you to put direct pressure first. Then get your tourniquet ready and apply it. So many times you can use a pressure dressing to control bleeding if it's not an arterial bleed. So that's what I want to talk about today. So for in a commercial kit, you're probably going to have some sort of a combat dressing. The one that I see the most, the one that I personally use is an Israeli bandage. They come in a pack like this. This is one I've torn open to use for training purposes. When you pull them out, they look like this, and they have a gauze pad area which is applied to the wound. They have this plastic lever over top of it, and then this material usually has a stitch through it, so that if you let go of it, it doesn't just all roll out onto the ground. This one I've already unrolled and broken the stitch, so that's why it's unrolling like that. This material is stretchy. It's about like Coban, so it lends itself well to applying pressure dressings. I really like these. There's other people that make them. They're not all just Israeli bandages. I think North American Rescue has one that is very similar, but it's slightly different. And I've seen a few other ones, but I've just always had these Israelis. I've bought a few of them and keep them around. The prices come way down on them. They used to be, God, they were like 20 bucks a piece when they first came out, but now the last ones I bought them were like $5 a piece. So I always keep a few around. I keep one in my IFAC and keep one in my everyday carry sling bag that I carry. Keep one in my vehicle. So they're very handy and they can be used a lot of ways. So if you have one of these for a pressure dressing, that's wonderful. So let me show you how to use this, and then I'll show you how we do it if we're going to use our AmCon IFACs that we issued, and then we'll talk a little bit about improvising. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to say we've come upon a scene. We've got a gentleman or a lady, whatever, that's been injured in the arm, let's say in the upper bicep. They're bleeding. It's been a bullet wound. For the heck of it, let's say it goes through and through on the backside. You want to apply direct pressure to that wound immediately to stop the bleeding. You're going to get your bandage ready. In this case, we'll use as an Israeli bandage. And you want to open it and place the gauze against the wound. Now, they make these. I have one in the other room that I don't want to open, but it's a 6-inch instead of a 4-inch. And it's got another pad that slides along this. So if you have an entry and an exit wound, you can slide it around so it covers the backside. We don't have that with this. So what we want to do ideally is maybe take some gauze if we have our Kerlex, or we could take our ABD pad and place it on the back side of the wound, and then wrap this on the front side. Maybe cut a piece of t-shirt material off and put it on the back side if you want to. The problem with just putting this over is it won't absorb any blood. If you want something more absorbent in there. So if we have a double wound, you're going to have to address that. Or if you have a Israeli with a double-sided, you can do the back also. All right, so we wrap this initially, and this has some stretch to it. It's like Coban, so when you wrap it, you think of that 50% stretch that I've talked about with the Coban. So you want to wrap this and put a little bit of stretch to it. But when you get to this point, we want to put direct pressure on the wound. So you want to make sure this lever is directly over the wound. And then this part simply slips underneath that lever. Then you pull back in the opposite direction and wrap. And when you pull like that, that lever cranking down applies pressure right to the point where you want it. So you may have to reposition the bandage to get it directly over the wound. And then after that, you just wrap it. And think of that 50% stretch to get some compression. And also, you want to wrap a little bit above and a little bit below the wound. Make a good dressing that's going to cover a wide area and not slip down so easily. So you wrap your dressing around, and then when you get to the end, you've got these two hooks. You can just grab a loop, and these hook over the loop, and that holds it in place. Then what I would do after doing this is probably go ahead and apply some more pressure there for like 3 to 5 minutes to really make sure it's getting good pressure on the area, and you can stop that bleeding, get that clot to form. And that is just a standard pressure dressing. And of course, if you put the pressure dressing on and that's not controlling the bleeding, you may have to go ahead above it and put a tourniquet on. But a lot of times the pressure dressing is really all that's needed to get that to clot off in there and to stop the bleeding. So that's how you would use an Israeli bandage or a pressure bandage on a wound like that. And my cat's going to show up and be a pest. All these videos I made, and I managed to keep her out of it. And this time she decides to show her head. Move. Go away. Go ahead. Don't make me look like a cat lover in front of my friends. Okay. Now, let's say we don't have an Israeli. All we have is our IFAK. Well, what we're going to use out of our IFAK to accomplish the same thing is our ABD pad and Coban. Now, this ABD pad's pretty big. If you have just like a one single gunshot wound, the hole may not be that big. You might want to fold this in half and use it that way. And if you do, remember the blue side goes away from the wound. This is a more absorbent side, so you want to flow the blue stripe together. Place that over the wound and apply direct pressure. Now ideally, you want to keep that pressure on there while you're getting your dressing ready. You could do the same thing with the Israeli. If you have a bystander, no matter how unskilled, you can just ask them to come place their hand there. If the person's conscious, now my mannequin doesn't have another arm, but if the person is conscious, you can even ask them to come and just say, here, hold pressure on this for a moment for me while you get your bandage ready. You just have to look at the situation and take advantage of who's there and do the best you can. And I'm going to get my shears out of my IFAK for a moment for this part. Now, I'm going to take my Coban and I'm going to wrap it around the wound, wrap it around the dressing, and I want to just get that initial loop started just to kind of hold it in place, and then I can really start working on my wrap. And keep in mind that 50% stretch that I discussed, that's the ideal way to do this. And as I said before, you want to go both above and below the wound to kind of anchor that dressing and make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And the other thing I really liked about this Coban is it sticks to itself. So it's pretty good. I'll cut that off. And once I get it done, I'm going to squeeze that all down real good. And then I'm going to apply that direct pressure on there. And this makes a really effective compression bandage. As you can see, it's all sealed. It's stuck to each other very well. You got good compression on there, but you still have some stretch. So if you start getting some swelling in that area, it will be able to expand and it won't turn into a tourniquet. And you can see there is no unraveling it. Once it sticks together, that's going to have to be cut off. It almost forms like a cast. So you can see there's no unrolling it. It just sticks to each other and makes a really good dressing. Especially if it were to get soaked with blood or something, just get wet in general. It's not like tape where it's going to loosen up. So that's how you use Coban to make a good, effective pressure dressing using materials that we supplied in your kit. You can see, just getting it off of here is a bit of work. So you can make a very good, effective dressing that's going to stay in place out of that Coban. Now, lastly, talk about improvising a little bit. If you don't have an IFAK, a commercial IFAK, and you don't have one of our IFAKs, and you come upon a scene, you are not really have a lot of choices except to improvise. And you're probably going to have to use the victim's clothes, or yours or somebody else's. So yeah, here I've got a triangular bandage. It looks like this when it's open. Sometimes it's called a cravat. I keep a few of these on. They're very cheap. I have gotten these for as little as 50 cents a piece. They're just a piece of cloth shaped like a triangle, but there's videos and videos on the internet showing how you can dress different wounds using a cravat. This was kind of the standard back in like World War I and before World War II when they came out with the Carlisle Bandage. A lot of soldiers and medics would carry these. When you first open them, they look like this. If you have one of these, this can be tied around to make a very effective pressure dressing. What you want to do is make sure to end it on top of it, the wound, so when you tie the knot, you can pull the knot down tight because there's no stretch to this. So your pressure is going to come from you tying the knot down tight. And in some cases, they'll actually tie a knot to make it over top of it and then tie another knot on top of that so that the knot itself is pushing down directly on the wound. You could do something similar with t-shirt material. You would hope that you at least have a knife or a pair of scissors with you possibly to use and to improvise some sort of pressure dressing. But the key is to get that direct pressure on there and hold that direct pressure on there. When you deal with improvising, you just have to be creative and come up with whatever you can come up with, to be honest with you. So I know it's probably not a lot of help, but what you can usually count on is clothing. Unless you're at the beach, people are usually going to have at least a t-shirt or a pair of pants or something that you can get some material from to make some sort of dressing. So that's about all I can think of on pressure dressings. You want to just get that pressure on there and hold it. Understand that any time a person loses blood, they're going to be cold. I don't care if it's 99 degrees outside in the blazing sun, they are going to be cold because they're losing that circulatory fluid that helps to keep the body warm. And like losing all your antifreeze, except instead of overheating, you're going to get real cold. So you want to try to keep them warm, get them in a position where you lay them out comfortably. You can turn them on their side in the recovery position. And if you have any kind of blankets or even extra clothing, just cover them up and try to keep them warm. And they may get very thirsty. Try not to give them too much to drink because there's a good chance they may end up going up into surgery. If you want to just fill their mouth with water, Even tell them to swish it and spit it back out again is okay. A few little sips of water isn't bad for a wound like that. Now, if it's any kind of chest wound or abdominal wound, do not give them anything to drink, because that fluid is very likely going to leak out into the abdominal cavity and cause even more issues. So just some kind of general food for thought. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. God bless. Stay alert. Stay alive.